Chicago Bears rookie quarterback Caleb Williams has a rough day versus that Bears defense in OTAs. Is this a big deal or no big deal? We're going to talk about that and more coming up next.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Locked On family? Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast covering your favorite draft prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson. You can find and follow me on X at DP_NFL. I'm a senior draft analyst, and thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. You know, I got to kick this intro to Mr. LSU himself, Keith Sanchez. You can find and follow him on X at TheTalentCode. Keep talk to him, baby.
What's up, Locked On family? Let's get locked in. This is Keith Sanchez, 2019 national champ with those LSU Bengal Tigers, man. And what the other side to this dynamic duo that we like to call the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, where we're your number one source for everything NFL draft content. I want to say shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day over here. But in DP, we are talking Caleb Williams struggles, right? There's been reports that Caleb Williams had a rather rough day in OTAs. Then we're going to talk about Malik Nabers, right? What can he mean to this New York Giants team, right? Can he elevate this entire offense by himself? And then we're going to talk about a second-year breakout player, Mr. Jayden Reed, Mr. Michigan State himself. We're going to have this conversation before we get into that, DP. Why don't you hit him with our title sponsor?
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Man, last week, Keith, to kind of close out the week in OTAs, Caleb Williams had a kind of a rough day. Him and the starting offense. Plenty of incomplete passes and near interceptions. Nicholas Marino, one of the beat reporters in the Chicago area, tweeted out in the 7-on-7 period, Williams completed just 3 passes. Jalen Johnson nearly had an interception over the middle. In the team period, most of the passes were completed to the flat, and Williams held onto the ball for a long time. He did say it's worth noting that Rome Odunze and Keenan Allen did not participate in 7-on-7s and in teams. And also Nate Davis, who's one of their starting guards, and then Darnell Wright were not practicing either. So when you hear all of that in context, Keith, still, I think, is it a big deal? No. For one, as a fan, I think we talked about, I can't remember if we talked about this with Chicago or if it's a different situation. But one of the conundrums fans have to deal with is when their starting defense is able to make plays against their young quarterback, they get into is that good or is that bad? Because you want to hit the quarterback's playing well, but you don't want your defense looking like a liability. So you get put into that bad situation. I don't think this is a big deal. I think this is a good thing for the Chicago Bears, right? Because now Caleb, the thing that we talk, like most of us have talked about, spoke honestly about it, he held on to the ball in college. It was like, man, you got to clean that up when you get to the NFL. The timing is different. The everything is faster. Like how much time you have in the pocket is shrunken to 2.5 to at most 3 seconds. Granted, you're a magician, so you can do some things. If you're Caleb Williams, I get that. But just on regular dropbacks, you don't have as much time in the NFL as you do in college, and the coverage windows are smaller. Everything is shrunk. Everything is shrunken and shrinks in the NFL. So I don't think this is a big deal. I think this is a good thing because you allow him to see, okay, this is where I need to get better. And there's no, oh, well, it was a USC teammates. It was the old line. No, if you are watching tape of yourself in OTAs, you see you're holding the ball too long and yet you're not letting it rip or getting it out of your hand.
Yeah, if I had one word, DP, to describe this, normal. Right, this is normal. We hear this probably every single year from every rookie quarterback that has ever got drafted into the NFL, that they've had a bad day in OTAs, right? Especially one of their first runs. And then when you lift off the fact that Keenan Allen is not there, Rome Odunze is not there, they're missing some offensive linemen, right? Then it's kind of playing with the backups, right? So the backups potentially going against the starters. So I think it's probably completely normal. Then this is the other part too, that when people talk about timing as far as quarterbacks and wide receivers and just offensive timing, right? It's the details of it, right? It's a quick slant. Am I throwing that ball, low and away for you so you could go to the ground and get it? It's so many details and nuances, and that's why those guys have to stay after practice to work on those things. And it's like, okay, how quick do you get out of your slant, right? When you run a comeback, right? Do you run your comeback 17 and work to 15, or do you run your comeback at 15, two-step out of there, and then whip around and look for the football? So it's all of those different details that go into it. But even in my time at coaching, right, when I was at LSU, the other side of that is that when you step on the field, the defense is usually a lot further ahead than the offense because it's usually the same thing, right? Like cover three is going to be cover three. And if you play cover three in college and you that free safety and you that single high guy, you got deep thirds. What does deep third meant since high school, right? You got the deep third portion. So usually DP, in these situations, the defenses are a lot further along as far as instituting the simplification of instituting a defense and what we call installs, right? So defensive installs, offensive installs. They're a lot further ahead than what the offense is. So I the one word is completely normal.
I love that. I love that, right? It's normal. And I think that's where like everyone has to come to grips. I'll never forget Pat Mahomes years ago. Man, he threw 7 interceptions in practice. And it was the opening segment, I think, on Good Morning Football. And people were like, man, it's practice. You got to learn what you can't do. And I'd rather you do that in practice than throw 7 week 1. I don't need you doing that in the game.
And I don't know, am I wrong in saying this? But I like as big as I always talk about allowing the young quarterbacks to make those mistakes in practice, right? Rather than doing it in the big media. And I think that Chicago, they handle things pretty solid, right? And it's probably because they just haven't had much good quarterback play, right? So it's like, who are we to complain and set a standard, right? When our quarterback play has not been that good over the past, honestly, the entire existence, right? So I guess what I want to get into, because we talked about it with Mock Draft Monday yesterday, is that their media and fan base is not as toxic as it feels like with the New York Jets and that type of situation. So we'll see how that thing goes. But like I said, I think it's completely normal that Caleb Williams. Now the details, we're gonna go in there and watch film, right? The OC, y'all hired the OC, I believe was the OC Shane Waldron, I believe. You feel what he can do, then cool. Practice is over. We went 2 for 7 or 2 for 12, whatever it may be, right? We're gonna go sit down in the film room. We're gonna figure this thing out. Caleb, this is how I want you to hit this. You talk to the young wide receivers. Hey, this is how I want you to run this route. This was supposed to be, this was supposed to look like, and then now we're good. And so you're able to move forward. And then what you do is the very next day, you go out and practice the same exact situation. And then now we're about to get it right. So I like I said, my one word for it is completely normal. I think the Caleb Williams situation, him holding on to the football, you have to work to coach that out of him. But then that could potentially also be the one thing that makes him great. So you have to fine tune and find that balance, because you don't want him to become the head case like what we see with Lamar Jackson in that playoff game, where we like, Lamar, there's 50 yards in front of you, my brother. Football. Let's win the football game. You don't want to take that portion of him, his playmaker ability, but also you do have to rein him in with DP. And we're going to keep this thing going and flowing. So coming up next, man, we're going to talk about what? LSU guy, LSU Tiger in the Big Apple, Mr. Malik Nabers, man. We're seeing clips of him making plays already. What does that mean for this New York Giants offense? Can he single-handedly elevate this New York Giants offense by himself? We're going to have this conversation coming up next.
The NBA Finals are quickly approaching, and Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the tip-off. Guys, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets and NBA Finals tickets all together. Especially when you have the Dallas Mavericks and the Boston Celtics pushing and fighting tooth and nail to close out their series and punch their ticket to the last dance. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. last-minute tickets, lowest prices, and guys, guaranteed. Road tripping up to the Big Apple to the New York Giants. And Keith, the things that have been said about Malik Nabers in OTAs, this is what you want to hear if you are a New York Giants fan, right? Jordan, I think is Ronan, one of the beat writers, apologies if I pronounced that incorrectly, for the New York Giants, put out a tweet, on the 23rd, a couple days ago about what some of the things he saw, some notables from OTAs. And one of the things he said, eye-opener, first line, eye-opener. Malik Nabers getting open on a double move for a deep ball, 50-yard touchdown. He's an explosive player. And I think, Keith, the thing is that we knew, like, that's something we all knew, right? But it's like, what was he going to be able to bring to this situation? What was he going to be able to do with a Daniel Jones? And I think we said, like, this is a guy that if you're Daniel Jones, you're Brian Daboll, you're getting the ball in his hands quick. You want to get the ball in his hands quick, especially because he is so good on double moves. If you start running slants and quick hitches, stuff like that, and those off defenders, and that's why I want to see where he, like, training camp and stuff, where they line him up the most. Because again, when we talked about him before, he had 1,500 yards, almost 1,000 of that came from the slot for LSU. So if you put him in a slot and you get a matchup against off coverage, flat foot safeties, deep, off covered nickel corner, if they're not pressing him and he starts running those quick hitches and you're getting the ball to him effectively, if you're Daniel Jones, that's when that deep ball comes into play, because he's going to run that hitch and go, that stutter and go, get vertical, and once he's even, he's leaving. Once he's leaving, he's gone, and it's a touchdown. He's the type of receiver that should be the volume guy right out the gate if you're the New York Giants.
Yeah, 100%. And when you look at this offense, right, no more Saquon Barkley, which we've covered that situation on here in depth. What your guy DP Darren Waller, there's been reports whether you talked about it, him potentially retiring, right? So you're down another offensive weapon. So that's two key pillars, right? That were there 2 years ago. They were supposed to be big pieces, and now you bring in Malik Nabers. The target share and targets period, right, should lean heavily Malik Nabers' way. And I think this is a situation where if you're Brian Daboll, you're sitting in your meeting rooms, right? And you're finding ways, how do we get the football in his hands, right? And get him 12 to 15 touches per game, right? And we talked about how versatile Malik Nabers is. So if that's as simple stuff as quick screens and things like that, it's like, go ahead and do it, right? Just give him an opportunity to touch the football and be able to move the chains for you. But then also, this is what you hope, DP, is that he starts to pull coverage and he earns the respect of NFL defensive coordinators, and then that opens things up for everybody else, right? And then you get some one-on-one matchups on the back end to where so many people are paying attention to Malik Nabers, and then now your other guys can make plays and make some things happen.
100%. And I think, for Daniel Jones, when you have Jalen Hyatt, you have Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, Malik Nabers, is this a A+ type of receiving core? No, but but one thing it does have is quickness, explosiveness, and speed. And for Daniel Jones, just get the ball to him, right? You just got to go out there. This is what Daniel Jones has to be. I don't even want you, if you're going to be Danny Dimes, I want you to, because you're passing dimes. You're like a point guard. Just be a point guard. Distribute the ball to your playmakers, because even if the reports that I heard in Detroit that were true, and that happened, it comes to pass, that Darren Waller does retire. You also drafted Theo Johnson out of Penn State, if I remember correctly, on day 2, who's an athletic vertical stretch guy who actually runs pretty good routes for a bigger guy too. Now, granted, that's probably not the role you wanted for him right at the gate, is to have to take over for such a unicorn at the position as Darren Waller is. When he's healthy, he's one of the better pass catching tight ends and mismatches in the league. But at the same time, if you do have to thrust that young man in there, for one, he's going to block, so he's going to help you get the run game going, because he's a really outstanding blocker in Theo Johnson. But then you have just speed, explosiveness all across the board. So it's like Daniel Jones, you want to keep who was it? Like everybody, I think everybody's mock Carson Beck right now, who's on a 2025 mock draft to the New York Giants. You want to keep Carson Beck out of Georgia, out of New York, out of your locker room for the Giants, right? If you want to push him down to the Jets, that's fine. If that's what you want, you got to go out here and play efficient football in 2024. I know they say he's health wise, he looks like he's ready to go, and he should be ready to go for week 1 and everything like that, coming off the injury. But yeah, it's too many weapons in my opinion right now, and I just wonder again how early and often they're going to feed Malik Nabers once we get to the season.
I have a question. With having Wan'Dale Robinson also, who operates out of the slot, do you think that you have some redundant skill sets?
Kind of like, well, yeah, to an extent, because like I think Malik Nabers is at his best in the slot. When you give him that two-way go, that space with his explosiveness, like that's a nightmare to cover, man. And I think Wan'Dale being that kind of Randall Cobb-ish, just do it all type of receiver in terms of run after catch, quick winning opportunities, is going to be interesting because if you go to 11 personnel, who is your 3 wide receivers? Because you still want to figure out, I got to get Jalen Hyatt on, right? Like that type of speed, you want to have as much speed on the field as possible. Because again, I think they do want to run the ball and take some of that weight off of Daniel Jones. So if you want to do that, how do you do that? If you come out in 11 personnel, you know you're going to need some speed to tell them safeties, listen, dog, if I see you creeping up, I'm going to throw it over your head. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm going to take that shot down the field to Jalen Hyatt. I'm going to take that shot down the field in the slot to Malik Nabers. So that's where it's going to be on Brian Daboll to see who's really the best fit. And then that's where the competition comes in there, Keith, because Malik's going to be on the field regardless. All right, Wan'Dale, you got to kind of earn your keep, because if Jalen Hyatt goes out there in camp and he lights it up, which I think JR said, Jalen Hyatt also had an explosive play down the right sideline. It was a pass from Tommy Colcutt's, Tommy DeVito, right? The boy wonder from last year. So, like, if Jalen Hyatt is bringing those explosive plays as well, and then, you know, Darius Slayton being the veteran, he showed himself well last season. You know Malik Nabers is going to be there. Wan'Dale Robinson might be the guy we're looking at like, yo, how often are you going to be on the field?
Well, I have a question. Jalen Hyatt, are you putting him on the outside or are you putting him in the slot also?
That's the problem. That's the problem, Keith. If I go 3 wide receiver sets, I'm probably going to put him outside, but I'm going to back him off the line. I'm going to have Nabers on the line. I'm going to have Nabers flanking him too. I'm going to have Nabers right in the slot beside him, and I'm going to have him off ball to where when he releases, that DB cannot get immediate hands on him, right? That, and then I start, quick zipper motions, pre-snap stuff to get him away from press coverage. That's this right here. I'm going to say this. Brian Daboll is going to have to be in his bag from training camp to week 18.
That's why I asked that, because when we started having this conversation about Malik Nabers' impact, right, and you talked about how he, operated best in the slot and what 2/3 of his yardage came from when he aligned in the slot. But then when you started listing off the rest of this wide receiver room, right, it's like I looked at him, was like, operates better in the slot. And so you have 3 guys who potentially operate better in the slot. And I don't even think with Darius Slayton you necessarily want him as an outside wide receiver either. So, it's an interesting situation that they put themselves in, through the draft, right? Through the drafting Jalen Hyatt. And they've went with very high-level explosive guys, but very specific in what they do, DP. We're talking about when they drafted Jalen Hyatt, and we had the conversations on here. Then Wan'Dale Robinson, we've had the conversations on here about who he is. So through the draft, they've drafted playmakers, but now it's going to be up to Brian Daboll to be able to mesh all of this together. And then we're talking about personnel groupings, formations, who's aligned next to who motions into what. It's going to get very fun, but they like you said, they've attacked the wide receiver position through the draft. They went with explosive vertical guys, and now it's time to just put everything out there and see what happens. But DP, let's keep this thing going, man. We're talking about another wide receiver, right? Just 2 years ago, those Green Bay Packers dominated the draft, DP. We're talking about the wide receiver position from beginning to end. But one guy that we want to highlight is second-year breakout player potentially. Wide receiver, he's from Michigan State, Jayden Reed. And we're going to have the conversation about Jayden Reed and what are the expectations for him coming out of the draft into his first year, now entering into his second year as a playmaker for the Green Bay Packers.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Make every moment more. Guys, it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL. And FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. With any winning $5 bet, new customers get $150 back in bonus bets. Guys, that's $150 to bet on everything that you want to bet on. Spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more. I know you're asking the question, well, DP, how can I get in on such a great deal? Well, let me give you the answer to that. Just visit fanduel.com/locked on and make every playoff shot count. Just visit fanduel.com/locked on and make every playoff shot count, because FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day shot for being our everydayers. Potential second-year breakout wide receiver. You said Michigan State, went to college there. Green Bay Packers second-year wide receiver Jayden Reed. On the 2023 season as a rookie, 94 targets. He caught 64 passes, 793 receiving yards, averaged 12 and a half yards per catch. He also had 8 touchdowns, accounted for 32 first downs. But then on the ground, he also had 11 carries, 119 yards. He averaged 11 or close to 11 yards per carry. He also had 12. He had two rushing touchdowns and 6 first downs off of 11 carries. So what does that say? This young man is impactful, right? He's going to get. He's a guy you want to get the football in his hands, and it's. When I thought about this segment, I was like, man, like this is hard to be a second-year breakout with Dontavian Wicks, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, like all the different the 2 tight ends, Luke Musgrave. I don't know why I always forget the other tight end's name for some reason. Tucker Kraft. Jesus. I don't know why I always forget about Tucker, and Tucker played well last year, man. So, Keith, when you look at Jayden Reed, what's his path to being that second-year breakout? What does it need to look out for us to say, after year 2, man, that was a breakout season for Jayden Reed?
Yeah, you beat me to it, DP, because I wanted to ask you that. I wanted to ask you that question and get your answer for it. You beat me but looking at it, I think in what you read off, I thought that was a very interesting stat line, right? It was in the sense of the fact of you understand what type of player he was and how he was utilized via the stats he produced, right? You're talking about the rushing yards, you're talking about the 2 rushing touchdowns, then you talk about the 90 targets and then the 64 receptions. So I would probably say this 90 targets is pretty solid, right? It's like, okay, how do we turn those 90 targets from 60 receptions into 75 receptions, right? Like increase the percentage, the catch percentage, the connection percentage, whatever analytic, right? You want to name that model. But just make sure that when we target him, the percentage that he catches the football is higher. And whether that's breaking it down offensively, whether it's Jordan Love's fault, right? Whether that's them getting on the same page and seeing different defenses, but also I don't mind utilizing him more, DP, because Aaron Jones isn't there, right? He's with the Minnesota Vikings. They brought in Josh Jacobs, right, which is he's an all-around running back. But if they want to continue to use Jayden Reed some in the backfield, I don't mind that at all. So I think continue to use him as that versatile moving piece. Make sure that you understand, because is it safe to say, DP, that Christian Watson is taller and he's faster, right? And then Romeo Doubs is taller and faster. And those look more like your prototype X. But I don't know, like if I'm a coach, and especially them coming out of college, talking about all 3 of those prospects, including Jayden Reed, that Jayden Reed was probably most ready now, right? And he's maybe your most reliable target. So if I'm entering every game plan, I'm entering that game plan with the thought process of, hey, how do I get this guy 8 to 10 targets per game? Like get him 8 to 10 touches every single game. And I think that'll add up to being a large amount. Now you're talking about plus 100, touches for the season. And that's how you improve.
No, I'm with you. And Jayden Reed, played mostly in the slot. I think 400 to 500 of his snaps last year came in the slot. So we think about going to 11 personnel. He's going to be one of the fixtures on the team. And the slot receivers typically the security blanket. Now again, you have two really good young tight ends, so it's like fighting for that security blanket title between the two big boys in the middle of the field who are either a better athlete or a bigger body than the defender they're going to see. But it's going to be interesting because, I think what we just talked about with Brian Daboll, man, Matt LaFleur, you got a lot to deal with in Green Bay because we also got Dontavian Wicks who play a lot on the outside. Christian Watson, and I know some people probably listen to this and be thinking, well, Christian Watson's always hurt, right? But this offseason, he's talked about how he went and got an independent study done, found out that he had more muscle mass on one leg than the other, and that was contributing to his hamstring problems. So he's fixed that, or we assume that that's now corrected. So if he stays healthy for 17 games, Romeo Doubs stays healthy for 17 games, and you're like, okay, now Dontavian Wicks can also work out of the slot as well. This might be a team we see do more 10 than 11. You know what I mean? They still gonna run Josh Jacobs. You still got Marshawn Lloyd, AJ Dillon is still serviceable in the role that I expect to be small for what he's going to have on this in terms of impact wise. He's going to have on this offense, but they definitely Matt LaFleur is going to have to figure out, man, how do I keep all these young guys happy? How do I keep all these young guys happy, well fed with the football? Because at the end of the day, it's only one football. So you got to be able to figure out how do we remain balanced in terms of running the ball, but also how do I still get the ball to my weapons? I do think Jayden Reed, in terms of like breakout, I think he's going to be that safe space for Jordan Love, right? That hot receiver to where, hey, because Jordan Love, everything improves with reps, especially as we saw the successful season he had. All right, you want to get the ball out of his hands, right? You want to, especially in this type of offense. Nickel, cat blitzes, fire zone stuff. You sending somebody screaming off the edge on the side, you're predicting him to boot towards, because they do a lot of boot action, under center, play action, naked boot. What happens when Jordan Love sees that free runner in his face, right? Or if he anticipates there's a free runner coming from either side, that's where you expect him to take that veteran step. All right, make a quick check. Motion Jayden Reed as a slot receiver to where he wants him to be. You're gonna be my quick option. You're gonna be my hot route. If that defender does release and come blitz, I'm targeting you. I'm getting the ball to you and allow you to make the plays that you can make after the catch. I'm really excited for this Green Bay Packers offense. So many playmakers, outstanding young quarterback, great play caller. Now let's see if you can do it again when expectations call for it. I always say it's good to do things when people don't expect nothing from you, but once the expectations are ratcheted up and people are looking at you like, okay, I expect you to be throw for 4,000 yards, Jordan Love. I expect some of these receivers and tight ends to be over 1,000 yards. I expect a replica of what we saw down the backstretch of last year for a full 18 weeks. This offense is going to be a lot of fun to watch. I do think Jayden Reed should be the guy that they try to target early and often, especially as that chain mover. All those first downs that he accounted for last year as a run and pass threat, you got to keep that going.
Yeah, I'm with that, and I think the word is becoming more efficient, right? Because, like you said, this is the thing with those young wide receivers is that they're running open. You have two wide receivers running open, right? You have a Jayden Reed and you have a Watson, right? Those and how you keep them calm is that, hey, if Jordan Love, like I said, if they're both wide open, and then you have a scenario they both open and they throw the ball to Jayden Reed, right? And then Christian Watson sitting there throwing his hands in there like, hey, I'm wide open. As long as it's a completion, Christian Watson can't complain, right? Or Romeo Doubs can't complain. Dontavian Wicks can't complain. But if it's an incompletion, that's when the frustrations come, right? If that was 3rd and 5 and it's an incompletion and I'm running wide open, now we have to talk about it on the sideline. But as long as we move the chains and keep it going and it's a completion, we'll figure that thing out. So definitely the increase of Jayden Reed production is definitely relying upon Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love making sure they're on the same page and they execute at a high level, because there are so many other young on this team also. But DP, that wraps up another episode, man, of the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. I want to say shout out to everydays. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day, man. If you haven't hit the like button, go ahead and hit that like button. If you haven't commented, make sure you drop a comment and talk to us. Let us know what you think about the show. What do you think about the Caleb Williams situation, the Malik Nabers situation, the Green Bay Packers loaded wide receiver room? And if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I am Keith Sanchez. You can find me on X at The Talent Code. That right there is my co-host, my guy, Mr. Damian Parson. You can find him on X at DP_NFL. And like we always like to say, man, y'all come talk to us because we like to talk back.
Go subscribe and follow for free on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts, to get the latest episode as soon as it is available. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. Come and join the conversation again tomorrow on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.